Chapter 9. Bloodline. I cannot believe that it is because of this miserable human that I am still stuck in these suffocating mines. The main reason for my visit was to meet with the head guard, collect the human woman, and head back to my fortress. Yet this human slave is different from the others I have broken. When I stood before him, his eyes completely lacked fear. It was only when I baited him, when I mentioned what I had done to Ruth, that I finally saw the raw, volatile emotion break through his armor. He is a true warrior from wherever he comes from, but none of that matters now. She is mine. However, I have no intention of inspiring a prison riot amongst the laborers. As the heavy titanium doors closed shut behind me, I turned to my 2 royal guards that accompanied me on this trip. "Guards, we will not hold the execution in the prison courtyard," I commanded, causing my voice to echo off the metal bulkheads. "We will hold it right here in the prison hold. Understand?" "Ja, Warlord Van," the guards barked in unison, saluting before marching back down the long gantry of the ship. As I made my way back towards my personal quarters, I realized that it has been 20 long years since I became the supreme warlord of Clison. My family had to sacrifice everything for that title. Generations of blood spilled to secure our grip on power. Now that I am the only male heir left of my lineage, I am beginning to question if the crown was even worth the cost. I wasn't lying to the human woman when I admitted that to her. The weight of an empire is a lonely burden. The sharp, pressurized sounds of my quarter doors opening startled Ruth. She was sitting at the low table in the lounge area, quietly eating. She looked up, her eyes wide with fragile hope. "Woman," I said, stepping into the room and letting the doors lock behind me. "Your friend is in my prison. He will be executed tomorrow." The prisoner must mean more to her than friendship, because as soon as my last word filled the room, a broken, sobbing cry tore from her throat. She bolted from the table and ran straight into the sleeping quarters. I wasn't entirely sure what she expected to happen. Did she truly think a slave could challenge a warlord and live? Ignoring her tears, I snatched some of the uneaten food from the table and walked over to my primary comm console, tapping the interface with a heavy finger. "Computer, connect me to Togoldor Zaya." Togoldor is my second in command. He is a fiercely loyal commander, and once I am too old or finally killed in battle, it will be his bloodline that rises and uphold the title of Supreme Warlord. Unlike me, Togoldor has many sons: Erdine, Ganbaratar, and Jargal. The Zaya sect is filled with strong young men. This is one of the main reasons why he is my second in command. His warriors outnumber all, plus they are strong fighters. The console hummed, and the holographic display flickered to life. "Lord Van, greetings," Togoldor said, his armored chest plates reflecting the transmission light. "We have been waiting for your arrival at the fortress. Why the delay?" "I have run into some minor complications here at the mines," I replied, tearing off a piece of the meat. "I will be on my way shortly. For now, I need an update on our status with the High Council. Where do we stand?" My conversation with Togoldor stretched late into the night. We mapped out troop movements, debated council politics, and secured the borders of our territory. By the time I finally cut the transmission and made my way into the sleeping quarters, the human woman was asleep. This time, her slumber was not due to a drug-induced coma. Batar thinks that I am blind. He thinks I do not know he is drugging her to spare her mind from me. The truth is, I simply do not care. But tonight, I will let her rest. For tomorrow, the human warrior will bleed. We will leave these miserable mines behind, and I will finally be home. Warlord Van, do you hear me? Please head to the med bay. It is time, I heard Bartar's voice repeating urgently over my comms. I was sitting in my private office, reviewing complex strategy documents from the High Council. I hadn't heard him the first time. I rushed down the sterile corridors, making my way into the bright white lights of the med bay. Ruth was lying flat on the metal medical table, covered in sweat, while Bartar ran frantic diagnostic tests on the monitors above her. "She is 9 centimeters dilated, Commander," Bartar said, his hands moving quickly. "It is time for her to push." Time for her to push? Is she having my child? The thought struck me with a violent wave of confusion. I cannot have children. According to the healers, an old war injury from my youth permanently prevents me from ever fathering an heir. How is this possible? I looked down at Ruth. Her belly was heavily swollen, her face contorted as she screamed in a crescendo of agonizing pain. Bartar positioned himself between her legs, coaching her softly, demanding that she push. And then a sound pierced the air that I never, in all my years of conquest, expected to hear. The sharp, high cry of my own child. Bartar carefully cradled the newborn in a soft, white blanket, turning to present him to me with a deep bow. The infant's skin was a striking golden brown, similar to the proud, noble hue of the highest-ranking members of the High Council, and his ears were distinctly pointed. He was a Manadiet. Bartar looked up at me, a reverent smile on his old face. "Your son, Lord Van." The scene shifted in a flash of brilliant light. Father, you promised to teach me how to use the dagger," a young boy shouted, his voice full of laughter. He had long, thick, curly hair and wore a small white tunic cinched at the waist by a brilliant red sash. Stamped clearly onto the silk was the sacred sigil of my house. "Yes, son, I will teach you," I said, as a strange, overwhelming warmth filled my chest as I kneeled to look him dead in his brown eyes. "You will become a great warrior." "No," the boy said, shaking his head jokingly as he smiled up at me. "Mama doesn't want me to become a warrior." Suddenly, a grand symphony erupted around us. Great war horns blew loudly, and triumphant music echoed through a massive chamber. Draped along the towering pillars of the High Council halls were the vibrant colors of my house, emblazoned with our sacred sigil and our ancient motto, honor and bravery. I turned my head to look down on the long, crowded aisle toward the grand dais. Sitting majestically upon the throne was a grown man, possessing the exact same thick, curly hair as my young boy, proudly wearing the colors of my lineage, with thousands of council members in the audience throwing their arms into the air, their voices uniting in a deafening, thunderous chant that will shake the foundation of the empire. "Quam falme wetu, kiongozi wa Clison, quam falme wetu, kiongozi wa Clison." To our king, leader of Clison, to our king, leader of Clison. Last night, I dreamed a dream of dreams. Chapter 10. Stor Beskita. I cannot believe Trogon is convinced that revenge will fill the yawning, angry void in his heart. To be honest, I wish killing Van would cause all his heartache to disappear. But I have killed enough men in my lifetime to know this is a lie and that vengeance provides no comfort. Van is one of the most battle-trained soldiers I have ever known. He did not acquire his lethal skills inside a comfortable training facility. He forged them in blood on the battlefield. Trogon may have received some of the most elite tactical training available on Draxix, but training is one thing. The chaos of a real war is another. I know that Trogon is a skilled assassin, a master of stealth, but he has never truly been tested in brutal, prolonged hand-to-hand combat. If I need someone to run recon or eliminate a target from a distance, he is perfect for the job, but in a direct clash of blades with Van, I worry that my son is walking straight toward his own death. It has been many years since I last held my own blades, but to protect my son, I will do whatever I must. I am 20 minutes out from the airspace of Clison. I have decided to bring my ship in low and land on the dark backside of the cliffs closest to the mines. With any luck, the jagged terrain will keep my ship completely unnoticed by Van's proximity radars. As the landing thrusters hummed, I reached for the console to see if I was close enough to bridge the planetary interference and hail Trogon on our secure frequency. Trogon, Trogon, do you hear me? I waited patiently, my eyes scanning the static on the monitor to see if the connection would fuse. I taught him to always leave this specific subline open, a silent lifeline just in case of an absolute emergency. Father, Trogon's voice suddenly crackled through the speaker, low and frantic. I am here, but I cannot talk. We are about to infiltrate Van's ship. The desperation in his tone cut right through me. Infiltrate? We? What are you talking about, Trogon? Wait for me. Panic flared in my chest. I could not believe he was about to launch a direct assault on Van's stronghold. You will need backup. I am landing my ship right now. But my warning was cut short. The only sound returning through the receiver was the harsh, empty sounds of white noise. The line went completely dead. Please, Trogon, I muttered into the empty cockpit, slamming my hand against the throttle to force the ship down onto the rocky ledge. Think with your mind, not out of anger. Back at the mines, Trogon, Robert, and Jake continued to make their way down to Sector 4, which is located under the landing pad, returning to the exact location where they had last attempted to sabotage the secondary cooling conduits. They remembered their structural scans showing that this very tunnel served as the perfect access point to reach Ruth, working under the assumption that she was being held directly above them in Van's personal quarters. Reaching the high-clearance ceiling grate, Trogon slowly moved the metal panel back just enough to peek through the narrow opening. Through the gap, he saw Warlord Van engaged in an intense conversation with a healer. Something about the healer seemed deeply familiar. Trogon silently slid the panel back into place and ducked back down to whisper to Robert and Jake in the shadows. Van is in the quarters, talking to his healer, Trogon murmured, his eyes flashing in the dark. We have to wait for them to leave. The three men sat in the stifling, cramped corridor and waited for what felt like the longest 5 minutes of their lives. Every mechanical hum of the ship sounded like an approaching patrol. Finally, Trogon crept back up and took another cautious look. This time, the lounge was completely empty and clear of all threats. Trogon quietly pulled his massive frame up through the small opening. Once he had established a footing on the deck plates, he reached back down and quickly assisted Robert and Jake up into the room. The quarters were grand, filled with deep red cloth draped along the walls, emblazoned with the proud sigil and ancient motto of Van's house. Plates of half-eaten food were still laid out across the low tables, and the entire suite was dead quiet. Robert scanned the room, his eyes locking onto a reinforced partition on the far wall. He pointed toward the entry. Moving like ghosts, they walked quietly toward the doorway. As they approached, the automated sensor tripped and the doors opened. There was Ruth, Chapter 11. The Legacy When the morning light broke across the viewports of the dreadnought, the echoes of the dream still vibrated in my mind. The image of the copper-skinned boy with the crest of my house was burned into my thoughts. I walked out into the lounge area. Ruth and Bata were already there, quietly eating their breakfast. As I read over the messages from the High Council, my dream refused to leave me. I found myself staring at her, wondering if the cosmos had played a cruel joke, or if there was an impossible truth to the vision. If she was carrying my bloodline, the final hope of the Xialu-Sint lineage, everything changed. I could no longer treat her as a captive. If it were true, she was the vessel of my legacy, and I would have to protect her at all costs, keeping her by my side forever. As I walked towards the seating area, my heavy boots alerted her to my presence. She was tense, so I kept my voice measured. If she had conceived, I need to eliminate her stress, and worrying about the prisoner isn't going to help. "The human Ralph," I said, watching her face sadden at the sound of his name. "His execution is cancelled. I have ordered him to return to the mines for 2 weeks of hard labor." Ruth let out a breath, a sudden, unmistakable wave of relief washing over her face. For the first time since she had been brought to my quarters, the sheer terror in her eyes flickered out, replaced by fragile, stunned gratitude. Even so, she did not want to be around me. She removed herself from the lounge area and returned to the sleeping quarters, leaving myself and Bata alone. Once I heard the bedroom doors closed, I approached Bata. "Run a full diagnostic scan on the woman," I commanded the healer, keeping my voice low. "Determine if she has conceived." Bata blinked, completely taken aback. He hesitated, his hands twitching against his white robe. "Before you can reply, follow me to the corridor. I do not want to risk Ruth overhearing our conversation." Bata followed me out to the corridor, questioning the whole purpose of my request. Once outside my private quarters, Bata questions flowed like water from Castan streams. "Warlord, Manadiots and humans are entirely different species. A successful conception between our people is biologically unprecedented, if not impossible. Furthermore, your old injury—" "Do not question me, Bata," I growled, my eyes flashing with authority. "Run the tests, now," I demanded, not waiting for Bata to respond, leaving him standing outside of my quarters. Bata watched as Lord Van walked towards the bridge. He couldn't even fathom what would happen if Ruth had conceived, or if a human woman would even be physically able to bear Manadiet's children and survive the process. Manadiet gestation was intensely accelerated, lasting only 6 cycles instead of the lengthy human timeline of 9. Regardless of the possibilities, Bata was ordered to run the test. Turning back towards Van's quarters, the doors opened to a sight that was unexpected. Bata, 2 human men, and 1 Manadiet who was fully dressed in the sleek black attire typical of elite Draxic warriors, were standing in the middle of the room with Ruth. "What are you doing in here?" I demanded, my voice catching in my throat. Ruth ran to me as fast as her legs could carry her, her eyes wide. "Bata," she pleaded, her hands trembling. "Please don't call for the guards. This is my chance to escape. These are my friends. They are here to save me." I looked past her at the armed intruders, a heavy weight dropping into my chest. "Ruth, we might be too late. Things have changed. I don't think I can let you leave this ship." Before Ruth could even respond, the older gentleman among the group stepped forward, his posture ironclad. "We aren't asking," he said, while moving closer to Ruth and I. Desperately, Ruth grabbed my hands, looking me dead in the eyes. "Bata, remember when I first arrived? You told me to escape if I could. This is my last chance." I took a deep breath. I am now caught in an agonizing gridlock. I am under direct orders from the warlord to run the scan, but I did not want Ruth to know why. Ruth, let me run some tests to make sure you are okay. It will only take me 2 minutes, I said, while dropping my voice to whisper. I will then let you leave. But if you fail to escape, I cannot help you again. Do you understand? She looked at me with a sudden surge of excitement. Yes, Bata, I understand. We do not have time for this, the Draxic-clad Manadiot growled, stepping forward impatiently. It will only take 2 minutes, I reassured him firmly as I motioned Ruth to follow. She followed me into the private quarters and sat on the edge of the large bed, just as she had done for her morning checkups after her long, brutal nights with Van. I pulled up my medical data pad, hovering the sensor array over her abdomen, searching for the impossible, the early cellular markers of a fetal heartbeat. Ruth watched me, taken aback. She could tell this diagnostic path was entirely different from my usual routine. It took less than a minute for the rapid processing array to scan the tissue. Then, without warning, a faint, rhythmic, light heartbeat sounded softly through the audio output of the device. My breath hitched. Ruth, you have conceived a child. You are pregnant. Ruth jumped back from the bed, her face contorted in sheer disbelief. How could this be? It has only been 2 days. It only happened twice. I stood frozen, completely confused and entirely unable to answer the biological anomaly of her question. But the realization of what Van would do if he found her now snapped me back to reality. You must leave, Ruth. Now. Moving with sudden, frantic energy, I gathered a few basic medical supplies and rations for her journey, throwing them into a travel bag. Don't even look for your companion in the prison hold. Just leave. Ruth looked at me sadly, her heart breaking. But we cannot leave Ralph. I turned to her with my expression grim and serious. You must, I ordered. Walking back out into the main lounge, I found the 3 other men unceremoniously eating the food that had been left out on the tables. Please, get her off this ship, I commanded them, my voice tight with authority. I meant what I said. If you fail to escape this time, I cannot help her again. I will then be forced to uphold my sacred oath to the leader of our sect. Without waiting for their reply, I gathered my diagnostic pad and left the room to find the commander. I found Lord Van standing on the primary bridge of the dreadnought, barking administrative orders at a cluster of heavy guards. My lord, I whispered, stepping forward, my voice shaking with a genuine, terrifying awe. The scan. It confirms it. The biological barriers have broken. She has conceived and the cellular acceleration has already begun. The look of worry flushed over Van's face. Prepare the dreadnought for immediate departure. He ordered the bridge crew. We leave these miserable mines today, he shouted. But before the bridge officers could even sound the departure command over the automated systems, a massive explosion rocked the structural foundation of the ship. Distal bombs began detonating in rapid succession across the prison courtyard below. The deck plates buckled under our feet as the ship's internal klaxons instantly changed pitch, shrieking in a deafening, frantic rhythm. The red emergency response lights flooded the bridge, and the automated security grid flashed a single, terrifying word across every monitor: Krigere alarm! Krigere alarm! One of the crew members transitioned the security feed of the prison courtyard onto the overview screen in the bridge. Outside, the air in the prison courtyard tore apart in a brilliant flash of fire and twisting metal. Sprinting through the thick, black smoke of the perimeter gate he had just breached, A Manadiot warrior drew his weapons. The thunderous blast had triggered mass panic, drawing a heavily armed squad of 15 elite Krigere guards away from the dreadnought's main boarding ramp and straight out into the open courtyard. Seeing the chaos, the nearby slave laborers realized this was their moment. Emboldened by the destruction, prisoners began crying out, turning their mining lasers and heavy tools against the facility's standard garrison guards. The courtyard erupted into a full-scale riot. The warrior didn't involve himself in the laborers' revolt. His target was the dreadnought. He only needed to cut through the warlord's personal enforcers, blocking his path to the ship. Suddenly, the 15 Krigere guards spotted him. The guards all attacked him at once. A wall of armored muscle, heavy shock rifles, and vibro axes closing in from every side. The warrior didn't flinch. In a fluid, lethal blur of silver, his heavy broadsword swung out, shearing through the lead guard's weapon before embedding itself deep in the soldier's chest plate. Simultaneously, his reverse-gripped dagger flashed through the smoke, driving upward beneath the helmet line of a second attacker. He moved like water, utilizing the guard's own momentum against them. He ducked beneath a heavy axe swing, spun past a blinding rifle butt, and sliced through the exposed hydraulic lines of their armor. His blade work was flawless. It wasn't a brawl, it was a beautifully orchestrated dance of death. Within a matter of frantic, blood-soaked seconds, the final Krigere soldier crashed heavily onto the iron deck plates. Standing in the center of the carnage, his chest heaving, I could see from the bridge comm screen that the warrior quickly wiped the blood from his blades and sheathed them. He hadn't sustained a single scratch. Turning his eyes toward the towering dreadnought, he bolted up the primary boarding ramp to breach the outer airlock and of the ship's service corridors.